GM friends, and welcome to the Future of Gaming. You're listening to our weekly FOGcasts. As hosts today, we have Devin, Becker, and myself, Nico, Vereecke. And today we have a very special episode. We are taking a deep dive into Avalon. At the end of February, a few weeks ago, the news dropped that Avalon raises $13 million to build an interoperable digital universe. This can mean a lot of things. And also, I'm kind of happy that you didn't choose the word metaverse. And so for this deep dive, we have probably the best two people joining us to explain exactly what's going on. We have Pinnock, who is the CEO and founder of Avalon, and we have Jeff Butler, who is the Chief Product Officer. And yeah, we're going to talk about Avalon, what's going on, what's going to happen, what can we look forward to as gamers, and very excited to get this off. Jeff, Sean, very welcome to the Future of Gaming.
Thanks for having us.
Good. And yeah, Devin, thanks for being here as well as my co-hosts. People will likely know myself and Devin, but Sean and Jeff, would you like to give us a very short background on yourself? And then we can kick off how that background rolls into what you're doing now. Perhaps, Sean, you can start.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. So I've been making video games a really long time. I know I'm a fairly young entrepreneur, and especially with what it is that we're trying to build. But really, I started making games when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. I was an original modder on Warcraft. Modded a ton of video games there. It's really how I got my start. And it actually is a lot of what shaped my vision for the game I eventually wanted to make. Looking at that platform back then, I probably spent 3,000 or 4,000 hours making games on Warcraft 3. I was actually an original Dota modder. It wasn't like the person that made Dota, but I modded and made my own spin-offs as well as a number of other games. Later on in my career, I started making indie games in college. I had a few fairly successful games, launched on numerous platforms. Also worked at Electronic Arts, did some work with Microsoft. Eventually built a virtual reality studio. I believed that something like the metaverse was going to be the future. Built some best-selling virtual reality games, built technologies for companies like NASA and Universal Studios, and sold that studio in 2021 to build what was ultimately my dream, and that's Avalon.
Fantastic. I have spent probably a couple of thousand hours playing custom games in Warcraft 3. What was your most successful one that I will have played?
I really liked video game RPG, and I actually made my own version of it. It's a game where you'd go and you'd play a number of different video game characters. You could play as Goku, Sora from Kingdom Hearts, Cloud from Final Fantasy, and just like fight monsters from all the different genres of games.
There's a good chance I played that. Fantastic. How about you, Jeff?
So I was super lucky. I was the highest level player in the world during EverQuest beta for a period of time, and got to be friends with the guys on the development team when they needed somebody to kick off their customer service department, because they were game developers. They weren't corporate people, building infrastructure and support. They reached out to me. Ended up hiring me. I was the first EQ lead GM. A week later, I was the customer service manager. And by virtue of my love for the customer and the work that I did to try to make sure that bugs were squashed and that the game continued to progress, I structured the live team, for instance. I ended up being the producer of EverQuest, the then world's largest massively multiplayer game, 9 months later. Worked at the company, shipped the first 3 expansions for the game, left to co-found Sigil Games Online with my partner and make Vanguard Saga of Heroes for Microsoft, end up getting shipped by Sony Online Entertainment again. Worked on a lot of games, Marvel Universe Online, early pitches for Star Trek Online, Harry Potter Wizarding World Online, all sorts of crazy stuff over the years, most of which didn't end up seeing the light of day, unfortunately. But fast forward to Sony Online Entertainment's attempt to push the genre forward again, based on the ideas that they laid out for EverQuest Next. A game that featured UGC and some fairly forward-thinking stuff, still entirely traditional and Web 2 based, but there's some really great ideas in there. It just so happened that Sean saw an interview that I did with one of my old employees talking about that game. He realized that he and I shared literally the identical vision for what needed to happen in the future. He reached out to me and started pitching me a game, and I held up my hand and said, "Hold on, let me finish." And I pitched him the rest of the game, and he said, like, it doesn't make any sense. Do you have our documents? Are you doing due diligence for one of our investors? And I said, no, that's the game that I want to make. It's in my head. And he and I worked together very closely over the course of the last year plus. And literally, we have the same game in our head. Every time we turn around, we say the same thing that we're looking for.
It's the game that I think most gamers have been dreaming of for a really long time.
It is. We say, I'm tired of reading about it in books and science fiction. It's time for it to be reality.
It's so
Sounds like you
exciting.
should have called the game Jinx.
Okay. Thanks, Devin. Before we continue, Jeff, what's the story behind that enormous sword behind you?
Oh, this is just a Lord of the Rings sword. Oh, you want an enormous sword? I had a 300-pound, 7.5 feet long sword in my library for about a year and a half.
Wow.
The sword from Lost Ark, actually.
Wow. Amazing. Good. So, okay, you have a conversation. You're pitching the same game essentially to each other.
Yeah.
What happened next?
We, initially Sean reached out to me to consult and just talk about games. And we realized that we really shared a vision. And over the course of a couple of weeks talking together, we realized that we wanted to work together. And so Sean said, let's join forces, join my company that I'm just getting ready to launch, and everything was just worked out perfect. It seemed like a perfect marriage in terms of our vision for what we wanted to see happen. I laugh. I have cynicism and experience. I've built a lot of games, large and small, and Sean had youthful exuberance, a lot of experience, like pulling games up from the grassroots level, building teams, which also was one of my favorite things to do. Together, we cover a lot of bases, and we've added to our team in exactly that way. Effectively, making any large piece of technology is a massive undertaking. When you talk about what could be a metaverse, even more so. The tools to build a metaverse, they haven't been built yet, even more so, right? Having the perspective coming from multiple points of view, it's key to success.
Yeah, it's incredibly rare to, especially in the games industry, to find someone who really shares your creative vision. Working in this industry, there's a lot of intensely creative people, but traditionally we all have really radical and different ideas. And throughout nearly every game and every project I've worked on, the people that I've worked with have had different ideas. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be when those people have a share of control of creative leadership. And when I spoke to Jeff, this person that really helped pioneer EverQuest, which helped pioneer MMOs. I mean, World of Warcraft would not be what it is today, and the MMO industry would not be what it is today without EverQuest. To find this person that shared this ultimate vision as me was incredibly gratifying, and I also knew that I needed him to help me to really run this what it is we're doing. But talking about the team we've built, I mean, really, it's going to come down to building an incredible team and empowering those people towards a unified vision to build Avalon. And I'm incredibly proud of the team we've built. We've pulled together rock stars from all different types of games. We've got people from Call of Duty, like one of the original Call of Duty founders is on our team. We've got people that worked on Elden Ring, Assassin's Creed, God of War, a number of other really amazing titles. But people from around the world, too, with diverse backgrounds, people with different cultural understandings. And it's going to be all of those forces sort of passionately pulling together towards what it is that we're trying to do that's going to make this a reality.
We've been very fortunate to build a company with a culture that's not ego-driven. I'm sure you guys have heard the stories talking about games of creative ego, disagreement, people pulling projects in multiple directions at once and not being able to get along. We've been extremely fortunate, but also very vigilant to make sure that we bring people on board who share that creative vision, so that we, it's a lot of work creating piece of technology. We don't want that work being a fight for what the final goal is, right? That it saps creativity, and enthusiasm for your product. And truthfully, we've seen this same enthusiasm and vision from other potential partners as well. Not just people within our own company, people who are also working the Web3 space, creating technology. Their sort of ultimate vision for where they want to go is the sort of product that we're working on, technology that we're creating. So finding these people headed in the same direction and with the opportunity to make partnerships is going to be key to our success.
What can you tell me about your vision and the game that you were pitching to each other, that initial conversation?
Yeah, it's essentially imagine a universe where there are tons of games built by tons of people. But inside of that universe, there's different intellectual property that interoperates. And one moment you're playing a game, let's say it's, we'll use an example, one of our partners. Let's say Merit Circle's built a world. They built their own universe. It's a high fantasy universe. They have a city. It kind of looks like Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings, but it's their own version and adaptation of it. Inside of that city, the guild leader is actually wearing the One Ring, but he also is carrying lightsabers. And there's an invasion going on. It's YGG, one of our other partners. And they fly in, and they're flying in with Star Destroyers and to attack Merit Circle City. And then there's paratroopers dropping out of the sky. And one of the paratroopers is dressed like Darth Vader, and another one looks like Superman. And this is all intellectual property that we've partnered with, different IPs that we partner with, and items that users have created with those partnerships inside of those own worlds, and then are certified in the blockchain. There's rarity, there's scarcity. Maybe there's only one ring. That's why it's called the One Ring. But there's there's the 9 rings of men. There's the rings of elves, the rings of dwarves, and they all have their own unique functionality, right? So that kind of paints just a sliver of the vision. Ultimately, what it is that we're trying to do is make it really easy for people to make content with our tools, and then have it all certified with the virtual economy. Decentralization and distributed services are really important to us. How do we build the technology in a way that isn't just hosted by us, but has longevity far beyond the success or failure of Avalon? And the only way to do that is to build a distributed architecture. So that's something that we're doing as well.
All right, I gotta wonder though. Just a quick question on that: how does it interact though with game balance and multiple worlds interacting? Like, are you talking like a sandbox environment, or are you talking a game environment? Because I wasn't really clear. Because like if it's a game environment, right, game balance is a factor there. Like those lightsabers and Star Destroyers versus medieval stuff doesn't sound very balanced, right? But if it's a sandbox, where it's like Disney Infinity or something where everything's just mashing together, who cares, right?
Well, there's actually an answer to that. So it is game, and it's game balance, and there's a way to do that. And it's something like, for example, I'm a huge follower of things like Tier Zoo and like character battles across different universes. And there's a way to say, okay, how strong is the One Ring? How would someone with the One Ring fare against someone carrying a lightsaber, a Jedi? How would a Jedi fare against Goku, before he was a Super Saiyan? These are actual things that we could reinforce with numbers. It's going to be an incredibly complex problem to solve, but it's something we want to do. But Jeff, do you want to elaborate a little bit?
So interoperability is going to be incredibly important. Take a universe, right? Take the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example, right? If we were all, the 4 of us, custodians of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we would have to craft a story and framework whereby She-Hulk can punch Thor, or what happens if either one of them punch a normal person. Very bad things, obviously. Spider-Man, who's not nearly as strong as Thor. What happens when Mjolnir hits Spider-Man in the shoulder? All the simple single universe questions, that you might be able to very quickly as a game designer create a structure for. We simply need to extend that structure into other universes. What would happen, if somebody pulled a phaser on a person who was carrying a blaster, like Han Solo? It's a complex problem, but it's by no means impossible to solve.
Right.
Just like pen and paper games have created universal systems, we'll create a system of filters and interoperability that allow people who create worlds to disallow things like, welcome, gentlemen, to my world. There's no magic here. Oh, no magic? Oh, so if I bring, you're saying if I bring the One Ring and Excalibur with me, that they don't work? Yes, that's correct. They don't work here. Or they do work. Everything works. Your phaser and your One Ring both work, for example. So, as you can imagine, the ability to create worlds and to set up those game balance elements are all going to be based on interoperability and filters.
I think the analogy to TTRPGs like is actually probably a good one than something like GURPS or some of those other attempts at universal. I mean, there's a lot more of them now, but like
D20, right?
right,
There's
exactly.
lots more of that stuff. I mean, you can look at Pathfinder. There's Starfinder. There's
Right.
Pathfinder.
I mean, that makes
They
sense,
are
right?
relatively
Obviously,
interoperable.
but it sounds like you're also talking about like some ways for permissions within worlds, right? Like some customizability. So like, hey, maybe sorry you can't bring Thor's hammer over here to this
Right.
medieval world because it's too strong for this world,
Right.
or because we don't allow magic in this world, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But and so then like there is some limitations to interoperability that are customizable by the people that are doing that.
Configurable, permission systems. You can build in my world. No, this is a pre-built world, and you can't build in my world. Or you can own land, and then you can build whatever you want to build there, so on and so forth. We want to create the tools that would allow someone like an intellectual property owner to create their own game, where you could have a game like Cyberpunk 2077 living inside the technology that we create, or Gears of War online living in the technology we create. If you take two steps back and look at the existing body, the sort of the cadre of modders and content creators out there, there are hundreds of thousands of people who mod Skyrim, Fallout 4, Cyberpunk 2077, who are crying out for a place where all of their work can be showcased, where they can earn money for their efforts, right? Where they don't have to like put up a Patreon account and hope that someone will give you 50 cents for the thing that you just spent 2 months working on.
As a VC investor, when I'm listening to a pitch, especially a pitch leveraging, new technologies and doing things that weren't really possible before, one question I have to ask is why now? Why is this the time to be building something like this?
It's funny you say that. We actually spoke with the people that made Jeff, what's that? Second Life, very recently, and he said to us, Avalon is the game that we really wanted to make 20 years ago, but the technology just wasn't there. The technology is I think really coming together right at this moment. We're kind of sitting at a time where
it's a singularity.
It's a singularity of events and a singularity of technology. We've got generative AI just making leaps. Unreal Engine 5 with nanite technology. I mean, people can build worlds inside of Avalon as dense as Coruscant. Coruscant from Star Wars. Google Coruscant. Look how dense that world is without having to know or understand anything about game development optimization.
10 years ago, Nico, I couldn't give you personal land in a game based on Unreal that would allow you the freedom of making, let's make Orgrimmar. Oh, yeah, no. It just
and now we can actually own our assets. We can build payment rails. We can build distributed architecture. We can put tens of thousands of people in servers together. It's all coming together. We can even load all this stuff on the web because of cloud rendering. I mean, imagine like one of the most beautiful games you've ever seen just on a browser. That's what we're talking about here. It's all this technology coming together at once. And then typing in a text prompt, hey, I want a high fantasy city by the hills, put some goblins in there. And then, by the way, all these goblins are intelligent because they're running, there's like ChatGPT-like technology running these goblins. They have a database of information. They understand goblin language. They understand about the lore in the world because you gave them some of that information. Build me this thing in a text prompt. And then you generate that little world. That's where we're going. And it wasn't possible 10 years ago. The convergence of technology is now.
Not even remotely. I mean, look at No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky promised procedural generation of content, and It took some time to reach that goal. Simple procedural generation of content has yet to reach the sort of lofty experience and the science fiction promise, where it's like, oh wait, are there quests there? Are there like really how much content is there? Look at World of Warcraft, the amount of time that it takes to create every single zone. Every 5 meter square area of the world is hand curated. An artist went in and fiddled around with it. Takes a lot of work. And that's the paradigm existing in massively multiplayer games today that we seek to break. That the company can never create content. The authoring company can never create content rapidly enough to satisfy the player. Look at Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons launched in the mid 70s without content. The only content there was the content you created yourself. Then they realized that they could create their own content, bring people into their worlds, and that they would be incredibly captivated. They could take fantasy authorship and shoehorn it into these Dungeons and Dragons adventures. Started to make good money doing that content. And alongside them, other people were able to create content too, personally. Then it exploded when they said, here, you can make content in our universe and we'll bless it, right? With third edition and open gaming license, which recently came into the news when they threatened to revoke those rights, right? People were up in arms. This is a great example of what could happen in the games industry with people able to author content. I'd love to see companies form to author content in the tool that we provide, right?
That begs the question, though: is your tool mainly for partners or players for UGC stuff, or trying to serve both masters? Like, who's it primarily directed at? Because you've spoken about partners that you have, right? Because of the IP stuff and dealing with that stuff. But like, how much does player have involvement in that, or are they just playing with those toys?
And ultimately, I mean, when we talk about building something like the Oasis, because that's all really what we're trying to do. We say a lot, it can't be built by a single company. It can't be built even by a handful of companies. I mean, look at what Facebook's trying to achieve right now and how much money they've spent, and they haven't been able to get close, in my opinion. You need to make it easy for anyone to be able to create, for anyone to build, and then for all those worlds to be interoperable. And then in the future, someday, we could have something like an Oasis. So really, we see what we're building is for the players, for the people. Yes, we're going to do a lot of partnerships. Yes, we'll onboard different intellectual property, and we'll build worlds with those things. But then we want to extend that intellectual property to our users. We'll make a good game, a good experience out of those things. But then, Devin, you'll take those tools, and then you'll go build a better one with some of this intellectual property.
Damn straight.
That's what we want to see.
It starts with one person. Think about content authorship on YouTube, right? It starts with one person, a single entity who's working alone. It could be a young person, could be someone in college, could be an older person, and then it goes, from that point they form collaborations. I do great work modeling. Sean is a spectacular scripter. We've got a texture artist. Next thing you know, you've got a large group of people, or you could start with 100 people working on existing intellectual property, using our tools as an extension of products like Unreal Engine, because you can author content in an interoperable world and take advantage of all the people who are participating without having to cannibalize the marketplace, as every other massively multiplayer game currently does. The Web 2 MMOs that are going to release over the course of the next year are generally cannibalizing from the same space. That's another paradigm that really needs to be broken.
And we talk about MMO a lot, MMORPG, and it's true that we're building systems around that to kind of balance interoperability to the best of our ability. Not an easy feat, of course. It's an incredibly challenging feat, but there will be systems in place where people can gate that as well. Like, let's say, for example, someone wants to build a world, and that world doesn't need to have the MMORPG elements, and so they decided to rip out the quote-unquote Dungeons and Dragons D20 rule set, and they want to build their own. That's totally fine. Maybe their world is more like Stardew Valley, or maybe it's a concert. It's a world for concerts. It's Madison Square Garden in New York City, and none of that stuff's relevant. But you can bring your characters in here. You can look like Superman because you got his stuff. You can carry Excalibur and into the concert. That's fine. So it just depends on the user, depends on the worlds they want to build, but we are pretty focused initially on the gamification and the sort of role-playing game elements, because we think that's going to be how people get onboarded into a not metaverse.
And we think that's part of the core entertainment loop anyway. I mean, the mosh pit with Excalibur is going to be a lot more fun.
So I've spent some time looking at UGC game creation platforms in all shapes and sizes. I think the two that I want to use as an example now are Roblox and Fortnite Creative Mode. Both of them have been able to scale to success. Roblox has done that through time, I would say. It took them 20 years, and now, maybe over the past 6, 7, they've reached that critical mass of creators that actually provide the content for the new players to come in and start that viral loop. Looking at Fortnite's creative modes, it's already in the name. Their success and their critical scale came off the enormous success of Fortnite. And that's how both of these have managed to solve the so-called cold start problem, where you need content for players to come in, but you need players in order to incentivize builders to actually create the content. How are you guys going to be solving the cold start problem?
It's funny you say cold start because I'm reading the book right now.
There you go.
Yeah, Andrew Chan's a brilliant guy. Anyway, for us, we have a saying in the studio that's really important, and I look at those companies and I still don't think they've fully captured this. You know, as an original Warcraft 3 modder, which really was like one of the first, I think, successful UGC platforms. Something that they did pretty well, and I haven't seen done as well yet, although Fortnite Creative, I think, is starting to kind of grab this, is creating really needs to feel like playing. It doesn't quite feel like that in those platforms. Like we want it, like this is why I think Minecraft is so successful. Is the creation loop and the playing loop are basically the same thing, and we want to really push that as far as we can. Like Hogwarts Legacy, which we released recently, they have a creative mode as well, and you're casting spells to build things, and it really feels like you're playing a video game. We're pushing that much further than these other games. That ideology, like making it really simplified. I use the Warcraft example because they have a scripting system built in that. Me as a 9-year-old, I was using to create events, to create functionality in my product. And I had no idea I was actually making code. And it's because they abstracted it so much to me as a user that it didn't feel like it. And so we're pushing those ideas really far. And then the other thing that's really differentiating us is that standard for interoperability. So that you know that you can create assets that interoperate with these other games. And then the scalability too. We're talking about worlds with tens of thousands of people. Worlds with extreme density because we're leveraging all the latest technology. I mean, Tim Sweeney himself said that he doesn't necessarily think Epic will be the one to build the metaverse, but he thinks that his tools will be used by another company to build the metaverse. And that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Tim stood in my break room 20 years ago at Sigil Games Online. It was 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday, and he had come out to help me with a milestone delivery that was coming up in the week. For Microsoft, and I said, I really didn't expect you to come out and help firsthand. And he shook his head and said, well, you're making a massively multiplayer game using my technology, and what I want to see in the future is Unreal. He said, I envision islands of content that are connected through Unreal, where people can move from your game to another game because Unreal makes that possible. He said, if I don't work with you and learn how to extend Unreal to serve a massively multiplayer game, I'll never reach that goal. Now, that was 20 years ago. And so Unreal has continued to move in that direction. Nanite, nanite geometry, nanite skeletal meshes. What nanite's capable of right now, you would consider almost black magic, right? Trillions of polys on the screen, 60 frames a second. A ridiculous assertion 10 years ago.
As a game developer, when Nanite came out, I was like, no, billions of polygons, no, I don't, BS, bull crap. And so I loaded up a scene. An hour and a half later, my jaw is just on the floor. Those engineers over there like cracked the code. They cracked the code. Like it's like we built worlds with literally trillions of polygons. We just throw whatever we want at it. It doesn't matter. It just works. It's pretty amazing.
Ultimately, there will be an upward limit. Every technology has its limitations, but the fact of the matter is, we want to be able to show scenes, of incredible density, depth, and detail, like Coruscant, King's Landing, right? Look at the rendering of King's Landing in Game of Thrones. Okay. There's a lot of work that goes into that rendering, right? It probably took a server farm a month to render those scenes, right? Churning on them. But
yeah, to be clear, there are limitations. Like if you open up Unreal 5 and you try and build a scene like Coruscant, you're not going to be able to unless you're a game development house with 30 people and you spend a long time. What we're doing is we're taking the things that we know that work, using our game development knowledge, and then building tools so the user can do that. They don't have to understand that, oh, hey, after about 1,000 draw calls, you're going to hit your render limit. Oh, you can't use this many textures. You can't put this many lights. And they don't need to understand those things because we're just going to make it so that's how it all works. And that's a part of gamifying the experience, right? We want to make it easy. I want a group of 13-year-olds in a weekend to build a fun game and not to worry about what it is that we're doing. Just do it.
I want it to be entertaining from a moment-to-moment standpoint, and entertaining to watch as well. Right, and we've realized very strongly over recent years that a game needs to be entertaining to watch.
Mm-hmm. From a gamer perspective, what is the main problem with MMOs today that you're trying to solve? If you had to pick one,
you can't create content rapidly enough. So if I were Activision Blizzard, I can't make WoW fast enough. If I'm, if I'm Square Enix, I can't make Final Fantasy XIV updates fast enough. I can't create content rapidly.
And to tag onto that too, like it feels like the same loop. Like I'm doing the same thing over and over again. Okay, I'm doing a fetch quest. I'm doing a dungeon that has this thing. I'm doing this raid. Like it's the same sort of thing I've been eating for the last 15 years.
Static world treadmill.
And it's boring. Like what I want to do is experience new, meaningful content that feels valuable for me as a player. How do I do that? How do I get there? We need so much content. We need so much novel content that it always feels new. It feels fresh. And we need dungeons that literally no one has ever done before. Constantly. We need there to be an endless staircase with a vision in the future that we all want to go to. The only way we get there is by creating tools that make it so easy and so fun to make content that the content's just never ending.
So you mean from players, not from AI, right? Like, or are you trying to do both? Like,
both.
AI enabling players?
AI enabling players,
right.
Both. Yeah. So,
gotcha.
like, to actually make games from AI, we're a little, like, to make whole games from AI, we're a little bit off. But I mean, when I say a little bit, I mean I think 5 to 10 years. I mean, I think in 10 years, you could do. We could be at that point.
AI is a starting point, right?
We can start augmenting it.
That would be significant.
Yeah.
Think about I don't know how much you guys look at like Skyrim mods, right? If you go to Fallout Nexus, Skyrim Nexus, look at those single player games and see the body of content that has been created by content authors, not the company, over the course of the years since those games launched. I mean, we could log on and play a modded game of Fallout 4 and spend a month playing, right? And not run out of content.
I guess referencing them, though, begs the question. So, like, they ran into the problem of, like, monetization around it, right? Like, players monetizing their own modded content. And, like, that's been a real sticking point. Even, like, look at what happened with Blizzard and mods. And, like, that's just been an issue, right? People monetizing things. And now, like, you guys are talking about IP mixed into that as well. You've got like the whole controversy over the D&D Beyond stuff, like licensing of IP stuff and content created from that. Like, how are you guys looking to help solve like the player's motivation outside of just sheer creativity?
So it's funny you say that because I look back at Warcraft 3 and MOBAs. I mean, look at how much money League of Legends and Dota 2 and a number of other MOBAs have made. And if Warcraft had just figured out how to monetize their UGC platform, it'd be the most dominant game in the world today. Right, it would be, because you'd have League of Legends on there, you'd have a number of other games on there. I mean, they invented tower defense games, they invented so many different games. Arc essentially existed on there in a much more small format, but we need to build payment rails around these systems, and blockchain is actually an incredibly good solution for that. How do we make it so that I'm going to use you again, Devin? How do we make it so that you make a piece of content? It's the Pokemon company's content. It's a Pokemon world. And so that when you create a world and someone buys an asset in that world, you get paid. The Pokemon company gets paid, and that person that bought it, when they sell it again, everyone gets paid again. Or even better yet, Nico, you look at Devin's world, and you go, "That's cool. I think I can make it better." You speak to Devin. You create a new spin-up version of the world. You modify it some, and then Nico, you get paid. Devin, you get paid. The Pokemon company gets paid, and every person that buys an asset down the line. And this can happen X number of times. However many times it needs to happen. There'll be a system built into that, and it'll be built directly into the smart contract.
I mean, is that going to be dependent on working with partners then that are a bit more permissive? Like, you bring up Pokemon, right? But we know, like, Nintendo, for example, is just not a fan of people doing anything with their work, right? Whereas, like the D&D Beyond stuff was trying to find kind of that middle ground of, like, how do we take some royalties from this, maybe from people that are making a lot of money, or how do we, like, take a cut? And obviously, like, we see marketplaces doing that, but we also saw heavy pushback from trying to monetize, like, Bethesda's mods, right? Like, that's part of the reason I bring that up, is there was, like, a lot of user pushback even from that stuff.
Part of the problem is that there are issues traditionally of tracking, right? Who's paying. There's no structure set up to support any of this work, and that's work that we plan on doing.
But blockchain technology is actually very unique in that, and it helps significantly with this problem. It's funny because it's not even the primary reason we're using it, although it does help significantly with this problem. Technically, it can be solved without blockchain, but it helps a lot. The primary reason is really decentralization. The metaverse can't be a walled garden, and we need interoperability, and that's really the primary reason. But Devin, I think that companies are really going to want in, intellectual property is really going to want in this, because they're going to see the economic opportunity, and they're just going to want a piece of the action. But you're right in that, the Pokemon company may not be one of the first companies. It may be one of the companies that we get much later. And it may just be that it's a lot of our own intellectual property that people start with, and we start slowly grabbing other intellectual property. I mean, look at Fortnite today. Look at all the intellectual property in that platform. If you have a game as popular as that, it's going to come. And I will say, just anecdotally, and we've had a lot of good conversations. I can't say more than that, but we've had a lot of good conversations around that.
Massive intellectual property holders
already. Jeff, tell me about all the intellectual property you've worked with in the past.
Star Wars, Star Trek, Dungeons and Dragons, Harry Potter, Wizarding World, the list, Warhammer 40K. On and on
our chief operating officer was the head of business development for North America, Bandai Namco, and he's worked with
Capcom.
And Capcom. He's worked with nearly not every intellectual property, but I would say most of the big ones you could think of. So we've got relationships there. It's going to come down to, does this make business sense for these people? And at some point, I believe the answer is absolutely yes, unequivocally yes.
How forward thinking any one of these individual companies are. Pick an intellectual property. Let's say Star Wars. How forward thinking are the people who are currently responsible at Disney for Star Wars? What sort of splash do they want to make? It's clear to the four of us here that they were forward thinking enough to allow their assets to be used in Ready Player One. It's not a Star Wars movie.
Power Spielberg.
Right. Not a Star Wars movie. Mm-hmm. But there's an ad.
Are you guys looking to also build content moderation tools for these? So, like, for example, the big concern that comes up, of course, is time to penis, right? And like Lego infamously dealt with that.
It's 27 seconds.
Right. And so, like, that was like Lego was a great example of dealing with that constantly, because they're like, as a company, they're built around the idea of UGC.
There are online games that have been shut down because of TTP.
Exactly.
Right?
And so that's why I wonder, are you guys trying to help with that, or you're like, that's on you guys building the worlds?
We're gonna be a mature game, right? Right out of the gate, for a number of reasons around the world, and Epic recently discovered this with Fortnite. Around the world, laws are changing, forcing online experiences to focus more on mature persons, right? To remove children and people who can be harmed by mature interaction from the online environment. So we'll be focused on mature players, mature.
So there's a couple caveats there, because I obviously use the Pokemon Company's reference, which wouldn't work in a mature setting. But you look at Roblox and you go, holy, like look at all the things that are going on in Roblox, all the bad things, and you go, wow, that's not good. We're gonna have to build technology that helps with moderation. We are initially a mature platform. I would say we're more a platform than a game, but with games inside of it. However, in the future, we're very interested in building worlds that are targeted towards younger audiences, but those worlds will be separated from the mature ones, right? And they'll be very clearly defined and these will be different games that are targeted towards younger people. And we'll have to have a much more hands-on, perhaps whitelisted approach. For example, my daughter right now, she's 2, and she just discovered YouTube Kids. Completely different than YouTube, right? And that's how I think of Avalon. We'll probably have, universes we call that are catered towards children. But initially, the mature audience is going to be our focus. So the Pokemon Company's probably not going to be there out of the launch gate. That might be, when we do Avalon Kids or something like that in the future. But yeah,
As long as you can keep the furries isolated to their own world, we're fine.
That's where Devin can go hang out. It's good.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
yes.
That's why I don't play Second Life.
I want to touch upon Web3 again. We like to talk about that topic here on the show. Jeff, you and we met, I think last year in New York or at GDC. I don't really remember. And we were having a discussion about New York, what Web3 brings to games. What is your answer when you're speaking to a experienced Web2 developer that tells you, hey, whatever Web3 does, we can already do that with existing technology without needing the blockchain?
Go, Sean.
Okay. So it's actually, it's funny. I had a conversation with a very experienced developer, someone that's been in the industry for 25 years, a staunch critic of blockchain. They said to me, look, blockchain is just a database. It's a 64-bit integer. Like, I hear that all the time. And I say, okay, that's technically true. You know what? Assembly is just a programming language. Why would you use assembly when, or C++ is just a programming language? Why don't you write code in assembly? Because that's just a programming language, right? Okay, so it's different. Here's what makes blockchain unique. This is what I say to people that are engineers that actually understand the technology, and I think most of them know this. But then you can think about how it's applicable. Is that it's not just a database. It's a decentralized peer-to-peer network that's scalable and secure. So when transactions occur, we're not looking to a centralized server. We're not looking to our server to say, hey, this is a legit transaction. We're instead looking to a community and saying this is a legit transaction. When you start thinking about interoperability in the metaverse, that starts to become really important. If we don't want a single company with the GDP of the largest country in the world to literally own the metaverse, we need to decentralize it. And the authentication layer is how we get there. So when we start talking about things like digital ownership, again, if we don't want a single company to own all of your assets, we want them to live in the community. The way to do it is with decentralization. So our vision for this is, how do we solve that problem, but in all of the layers? Because there's other layers. Like, the blockchain doesn't have enough throughput to carry, assets. I like to equate it to like the deed of a house, because the reality is it is a small amount of data. So like when you buy a home, or when you buy an item in Avalon or in another game, you're not literally buying the house, the asset. You're buying a deed. You're buying a deed to the home. So that's what it is that blockchain serves us for. It solves that problem of the equation. And then, yes, we're going to need more layers to solve the asset problem. We're going to need an interplanetary file system or a torrent system to host all those assets, and to have standards built around those assets, metadata built into the smart contract that says, okay, when I take this asset from my game and pull it into your game, this is where I can pull the asset from. This is the metadata that's associated with it. This is how it's supposed to work. And I know that it's legit. I know that it's verified because I can verify it through this community, this peer-to-peer service, and not this single server, this overlord of the metaverse. Does that make sense?
I have a simple real-world answer. As developers, right now, if you work with Steam, they take a big cut. Right? If you create content for games that are on Steam and you sell that content on the Steam store, they take a big cut, a huge cut. But they do, in effect, mimic the sort of behavior that we're talking about. We can go play Warframe today, and you can download someone's skin that an individual author made, not an official Warframe skin. It's modded content, and we don't want and really can't tolerate the sort of science fiction story that you see in Ready Player One, where there's one individual entity in control of all this data and information. If you know, if a metaverse is going to be for people, it's going to include everyone and have a low barrier to entry, which is going to be necessary for it to succeed, right? Literally, it's there for everyone. You can be educated there. You can receive mental health care there, and so on and so on, right? All the needs that society is going to have to draw from this technology, it needs to be there for everyone.
And that's part of why I don't believe that what we're doing is even at its ultimate vision, like the metaverse. What really is the metaverse is, I would say we're building a multiverse or a universe at best. What really is a metaverse is we build this platform. It has all these great games inside of it, but then we can interface with this game, with this platform, with this thing. And what's important is that unlike Steam, when we're moving assets from game and people are buying things over there, we're not taking a piece of that action. Right? That's their platform, that's their product. It's decentralized. That's what it is that we're really trying to achieve, and that's what blockchain helps us solve. But if we're not careful, what we're going to end up with is something much bigger and much scarier than Steam, something much bigger and much scarier than Apple, and it's going to be this walled garden that just eats everything. And I'm trying to solve that problem. We're trying to solve that problem, and blockchain is just a tool in the shed for that. And we have to look at the technology and be honest. Though a lot of people have lied a lot. They've promised a lot of things. They've said they're going to do X, Y, or Z, and they've essentially taken advantage of people. And that's not at all what we're about. Like we just look at it as a tool in the shed to help us solve this problem.
We want to guard against that virtual dystopia, right? They say it can be done in Web 2, but they haven't done it. Right. We tried. We argued back in 1999 while we were working on EverQuest that we should head in this direction, and our corporate overlords and our corporate attorneys, corporate counsel said no, like that we can't. We don't want to spend the time to craft the EULAs and laws that could encompass the sort of vision that you have. That's sometime way down the road in the future. Again,
when the internet was built, we're all really lucky in that it was built by essentially a nonprofit trying to create standards and open protocols for the internet, and that was really great. That was in the 90s. People didn't really think the internet was going to be a big deal. It's obviously massive. Thank God it was built that way. But you look at where we are today, and essentially the nature of capitalism and businesses, and what we're really having now is these massive companies just owning parts of the internet, all these centralized services. And these are companies, the largest companies today, I think 7 out of 10 are technology companies that really only came into existence in the last 30 years, some in the last 10 years. And when you start thinking about, this metaverse and this new walled garden that's going to happen, it's going to make these other companies look small. And so how can we create open protocols that align with our capitalistic nature society, our Western society, that open and decentralize this technology? That's really, really important. And I wish more people were thinking about it and talking about it. How scary is it going to be for one company to own that? When we talk about 20 years into the future.
In 1985, if this was a 4-way conference call with us all around the world, it would have cost hundreds of dollars through AT&T and whatever telecommunication services that we were working with. Imagine what this call would cost if that company were still in charge of everything that we're doing right now. Right? That's what we have to guard against. I don't want to log into the Steam metaverse and have 30% of every transaction and everything that I do scraped off the top.
All the advertising, all the data they're going to have on you. It's going to be invasive. IOI Industries, right?
Well, then how comfortable would you guys be working? Let's say Zuckerberg came up and was like, I like what you guys are building. It's better than what we're doing. We'd like to kind of work together to interface this stuff, put it on the Quest, whatever. Like, how open would you guys be to, because if you're trying to build interoperable technology, right? Do you go, sorry, you just don't fit with our vision, you can't be part of our interoperable thing? Or is it more, hey, we're trying to build stuff that's permissive. If you want to interop, you can do it at this level,
Right.
and that's it? Like,
so I mean that conversation can go a lot of ways, right? Like what would happen if someone like that tried to acquire us? What would happen if they want to interop with us, right? There's a lot of different ways that could go. What's most important to us is that we stay true to our vision, our ethics, and what it is that we're trying to achieve. I think absolutely we'll need partnerships with companies like Meta, like Facebook, like Amazon. We'll want to work with those companies, and I mean, as long as we can ethically continue doing what it is we're trying to do, and I think as long as honestly we can retain control, we can be certain, at least in the short term, that we can do that. Now long term, I say retain control. And for our platform, we want to build a DAO. It's very important. It's an actual functioning DAO, not a BS. We have a DAO. Like really build this into the platform and have it help regulate Avalon. That's long-term vision. Short-term, we're going to guide us until we can get to a path that we can really slowly unleash this. And that DAO is probably a little bit of an antiquated term, some sort of governance. I really like futarchy. If you guys Google futarchy, I know it's a funny word. There's a lot to be gathered from that for governance.
Honestly, interoperability has to start at an individual, right? The 13-year-old kid, you, Devin, we have to be interoperable with all your ideas, up to owners of intellectual property, large companies, consortiums that want to live and do business in a burgeoning metaverse. Interoperability has to include them all, or then you're basically making arbitrary decisions about who can come play in your playground, right? That gets ugly pretty quickly. I think we'll draw the line at criminals, people who wish to exploit, people who have repugnant ideologies, right? As determined by a DAO or society in general, or the law.
Yeah, laws. That's part of our motivation for building this in a way that's decentralized and democratized. Is the laws can't keep up. The laws from around the world, they can't keep up with the regulation that needs to happen, and the regulation needs to happen. Like, I don't want to be the arbiter of the metaverse. That's too big a cap for any one human to wear. I don't care who you are. We need to build a democracy into this platform. It needs to be done, and we're not going to be able to do it with laws alone. It has to be built into the technology.
What's going to be the approach to partnership then, in terms of like, so like there could be like one level, which is just saying like, come to us if you're interested and we'll talk about it, which is the like not public at all really version, right? And then there's we have a partnership program you can apply to here, and it has these terms or whatever. And then there's anyone could build using this API or this technology as long as they're following these technologies rules. Like, those are kind of some different levels. Like, where are you guys looking to go? I know short term maybe haven't been decided completely yet, but
Yes.
Yeah, yes to all three. Yes to all three.
perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. You literally answered the question.
Yeah, yes to all three. So, I mean, long term, when Avalon releases, it's going to be built in such a way that anyone can just start building. No questions asked. Like, if you're a big intellectual property, you can just jump on there and start building. If you're an individual, you can just jump on there and start building. Again, creating needs to feel like playing. You won't even know you're doing it. You'll be playing the game, taking out a village of goblins, and then next moment, you're going to be building a city, right, with your buddies. That's how it's going to work. But then we're going to reach out to intellectual property too, and try and get them to hop on board with us. Go ahead, Jeff.
In EverQuest, you weren't allowed to steal intellectual property. So if you made a name like Darth Vader, right, and you started running around with black gear on, we'd come and change your name, and people would scream and like, "Hey, like I got this name first." Like, do you own the rights to Darth Vader? Well, the guy lives in Waukegan. No, he did not own the rights to Darth Vader. So he changed his name. One day we came to a guy named Dritz de Erden. the famous ranger from Forgotten Realms, who's in all of R.A. Salvatore's books. And we were like, hey, it's great to meet you, Dritz. We had to change your name. He's like, why? And we said, well, because your name is intellectual property, right? Belongs to R.A. Salvatore. And he said, could you do me a favor? Sure. Before we change your name? Well, yeah, okay. He's like, can you look up my registration information from your interface there? And the DM was like, hold on, sure. Robert something Salvatore, I forget what his middle name was. And yeah, that was R.A. Salvatore running around in our game as Dritz de Orden. And the dungeon master said, well, we hope you're enjoying the game. Thank you, sir. You can keep the name Dritz de Orden since it belongs to you. Great example of what the future is going to bring to us.
Well, I hope we have NFT licenses and stuff in the future so that you don't have to ask that question.
Exactly.
You can ask the blockchain, do you have permission to do that?
Precisely the case where, like, I hand you a teddy bear and you look at that teddy bear and everyone who's ever owned it, you find that it was given to me by R.A. Salvatore 3 years ago.
Yep.
And so on and so forth.
That's part of the problem blockchain solves, right? It makes all of that much easier, automated and decentralized. Yeah, didn't you guys kept working with R.A. Salvatore, right? After that, Jeff?
Oh, absolutely. R.A. Salvatore, he presided over the authorship of EverQuest-related books and stuff like that. We forged a business relationship with him. Ultimately, I don't know how much you guys are aware of the darker side of free-to-play gaming. The fact that money laundering and terrorism has been involved over the years. I mean, these are very real issues. And those issues, I brought them up when people started talking about free to play. I was like, hey, wait a second, isn't this a textbook way to launder money? Right? I go from a country where where we're not allowed to commerce with that country, and I buy a bunch of game cards and then move the money across international borders in ways that don't require any effort on the other side, because it's all digital transactions and goods, right? So I buy $100,000 worth of materials in, say, let's say EVE Online, right? And next thing you know, money is laundered as a result. It's not rocket surgery. We've got to guard against things like that. If we're going to create this incredible thing, we can't allow it to be destroyed from within by bad actors.
We have to, or the FBI will make us. So we're gonna have to.
Yeah. Unfortunately, if the government doesn't like you, then suddenly you're a harbor for kiddie porn and terrorism and drugs and everything else, right? You're suddenly the new Silk Road or whatever it is. You just get labeled that way, and I think
we're gonna have to have pretty heavy-handed moderation in the early days, especially. It's going to be a complicated thing because we are really trying to build democracy into this platform. If we go the distance, there's going to be all kinds of legislation built around this. Who knows? Who knows where this is going to go? So,
having worked with the then world's largest massively multiplayer game, I can tell you the people who developed that game were not thinking about TTP. They weren't thinking about all the moderation problems that they were going to have in customer service. One of the reasons why I came on board, because I really played the crap out of Ultima Online and other games, and I knew the problems that they were going to have with moderation, even volunteer moderation. The story goes way back into interpersonal problems and laws broken, all sorts of other crazy stuff. So having that perspective will help us a lot, and we're going to have to extend that perspective into this future of gaming that we're talking about, right? It's going to require a lot of very intelligent people sitting down and engineering tools, moderation, structures that allow us to prevent all the bad stuff from happening. And picking up technology that already exists and using it as a tool just makes sense.
Appreciate using the titular line of the show, by the way.
Exactly. That's what we're here for. Thank you, Jeff.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we're here.
And so, final question. What's next for Avalon? What can we expect, and where can people stay updated?
Yep. So, making MMOs take a long time. making this takes a long time as well. But we've been at it for about a year. We've built a pretty amazing team, about 50 people now. I imagine by the time we'll ship, we'll be over a couple hundred at least. We had a press release recently. You can join our Discord. You can find our Twitter at Avalon if you want to stay up to date with the most recent things. But look out for some big announcements later this year. We haven't shown you much. That's on purpose, but there's a lot to show. We're gonna be dropping some jaws later this year. So look out. Look out.
Can you come do those on the podcast first, so that way we can be exclusive?
Woo. Asking the real questions. I like it.
Yeah.
Good. Fantastic.
We'd love to loop back around with you guys frequently and talk about the stuff that we're
Hopefully,
working
eventually,
on.
we'll be doing this on the Avalon platform, right?
Exactly.
We actually talk about that, right?
That's actually ironic you say
jumping
that.
It's something we initially discussed. We are working toward actually having our meetings and our collaboration in our tool.
Got to dog food it. Eventually,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need that fogged out world, right, Nico? Screw
100%.
Decentraland. Let's move over.
Keep
Let's move over to
waiting for
Avalon.
the
That
best.
battle between Merit Circle and YGG and FOGdao is going to drop in with the nuclear bomb and just take everyone out.
Easy.
Take all those
Yeah.
digital collectibles, millions of dollars in loot. They're going to be pretty sad.
Mod them out of existence.
Can finally put my bags to work. All right. Good.
Yep.
Jeff and Sean, I want to thank you so much for joining. This was amazing. You guys are building something really exciting, and I can't wait to have you on again to talk about some more information. We could talk about a bit more about what you've already done and what you're going to do. Devin, thanks for asking the good questions here. Always appreciate you being here. And listener, thank you most of all for listening. If you made it here, really appreciate it. If you liked it, feel free to let us know. Leave us a like. You're listening to this probably in the week before GDC. If you're going to be at GDC, we're doing a FOGdao meetup Thursday, 10 a.m. Details to be confirmed. And if you want to join that, it's actually like I made a Eventbrite event, 200 tickets sold out already. I don't know how. But if you join a Discord and just ping us, we'll definitely get you in. All right, that was it. Thank you guys for joining and speak to you in the next episode. Ciao.